I want to speak to you today about what I'm calling the Christian synthesis. Right? That is your heading. It goes to the top of the page. And this is one of the more important little details we're going to cover along the way in our studies of philosophy. The class, as I think most of you know, is actually called Philosophy and History of Christian Thought. Did you know that? That's the full title of the class. Philosophy and History of Christian Thought, which is a course that you'll sometimes find in catalogs of seminaries or Christian colleges and so on. And that's basically the curriculum that I'm following as well. So we're going to be dealing with philosophy, but especially interested as we go along in the way in which philosophy, philosophical thought, interacts with Christian tradition. And this is the point where, of course, Christianity sort of merges in, because so far everybody we've looked at has been pre-Christian. We have been looking at, starting way back at the pre-Socratics, the two great schools of thought, and those schools of thought now would be best represented by the two characters. You can say this in your sleep, you know it so well.
Plato and Aristotle.
No! The pre-Socratics, thank you. Listen to the question. All right, so we got Parmenides and we got Harry. Okay. And Stephen, Parmenides would stand generally for that tradition in philosophy that could go by the term, there's several good answers you could give me, anyone will do, but maybe the best, broadest term would be
incorporeal modalism.
Well, it's a little too narrow. It's pretty good. I like that. That sounds really...
He was a rationalist.
Rationalist, thank you. That's what I'm after. So you have the great tradition of rationalism, which focuses more on mental operations rather than, you might say, scientific or observational activity. Then over here we have Heraclitus, and of course, if Parmenides stands for rationalism, then clearly Heraclitus must stand for that great tradition that stands over against rationalism that we would call...
I was thinking irrationalism, but I think that's...
Not irrationalism. That does come in. We do get irrationalism sometime along the way.
I was thinking logos with him.
No, not logos either, although it does go with him, so that's fine. Kayla? Empiricism, thank you. So those two terms now should be pretty familiar to you. You should be able to recognize that you have these two traditions, and they are in conflict. And Parmenides stands for the tradition that says truth really comes from inside your mind, whereas Heraclitus is more focused on what's going on outside the level of observation. Then, of course, we get the first great synthesis. Well, just to make sure you're all remembering this, we get an impasse, first of all, a period of skepticism. And Alicia, the most dominant philosophers of this skeptical period would be called the...
I was going to say...
Oh, sorry. You looked at me so quizzically that I was afraid you were going to let it. And who is it then? The Sophists. Thank you. Yeah, sorry. I didn't mean to do that. You looked at me with a desperate expression on your face, like you might have come through. So. The Sophists, who are the first great rhetoricians. They're the first great masters of speaking, persuading the masses. And then, of course, we get the great synthesizer, and the first great synthesizer would be Plato. Thank you. Okay. This is all review, so it should all be in your notes. You shouldn't have to be writing anything right now. You should be thinking to yourself, "Oh, I know all this," because hopefully you do. You know, Plato, who is, in my estimation, about 66% Parmenides, about 33% Heraclitus, and I don't know what the other 1%
Okay,
amounts.
60s. Oh my gosh.
Did I mess you up? What did I say last time? 75-25. Okay, sorry. You know, philosophy, my son, is like what they say in the biz, a floating crap game. You never know. You never know where the right answer is going to show up. So, okay, we'll go with 75-25. That's just fine. That's okay. There's no exact science here, just kind of broad impressions. And Plato, of course, his ideal world, the world of the forms, all of his methodology, his epistemology, all of this really emphasizes more of the Parmenides approach. And then, of course, along comes Avery,
Of course, along comes Aristotle.
Aristotle. Thank you. And then we have another period of skepticism. And the two philosophies that largely dominate the Hellenistic period, these are called the Hellenistic Philosophies. And they are, Joe?
Let's see, there's Epicureanism
That's good.
and Stoicism.
Thank you. Why are both of those, Jacob, skeptical? They're both called skeptical philosophies in the sense that sophism was skeptical. Why are they called skeptical?
They tend not to try to answer the big questions and just focus on basics of life.
Okay, that's right. They not only don't even try to, they basically take the view nobody can answer them. They are unanswerable questions. It's like asking, is there an amoeba on Mars? Well, maybe. But, you know, now here's a man who thinks he knows. Have you checked out every molecule on the planet Mars? He has, so see, I guess I have to stand corrected here. But most people, you know, might be slightly more modest, say, well, until I can go check every molecule of the planet Mars, I'm going to leave it as an open question. There may be a priori confidence some people bring based on authority, like the Bible or something. I don't know if that's going on here, but in terms of empiricism or even some kind of pure rationalism, we say, don't know. In a sense, that's what the Stoics and the Epicureans were saying, don't know. So they're trying to give practical answers, Jordan, to the practical questions of life. And the practical answers to the practical questions they give are what? The Epicureans and the Stoics give what answers?
Well, the Epicureans believe, or they said that just we can fulfill our pleasures and
Okay.
follow those.
Right.
And then the Stoics said that.
Well, that's half right. That's good. You're good for the Epicureans. And Laura, you can finish out the rest of it. The Stoics, their response, the alternative answer they gave was?
Not to let your emotions confuse it.
Okay, that's right. They're both, please get this, they're both answering the same question. They're giving two different answers to the same question. Question is, how to be happy. Epicurean answer, well, pursue pleasure, not too much. Just enough. Stoic answer, the way to be happy is really to just keep your emotions completely in check. Keep them under control. Never be carried away with them. It'll get you in trouble. Let your mind be dominated by disciplined reason. That is the key to happiness. You know. And those two philosophies and a bunch of others dominate it now. Now when I say a bunch of others, what I mean is there was Jewish Gnosticism. We have Philo. He was giving his little answer. You've got mystery religions. I will hold you accountable for stuff on Philo. I won't hold you accountable for stuff on mystery religions. But just be aware that they were out there. And there were some other minor movements, little groups that kind of popped up here and there, peppering the philosophical landscape with unique, strange, odd little answers. But nobody was coming out and saying, here's the big answers. You know, here's the big answers to the big questions. Wasn't happening. Even in Israel, what you have is a pretty significant deterioration of really serious, profound inquiry into the important matters of the Jewish faith. And it was becoming a lot of politics, and you have the Pharisees and the Sadducees and a bunch of others that are squabbling about stuff. But even there, you don't have this kind of, really weighty concern. All right, and that's where things are as we come rolling into the first century AD. And the next great synthesis. Now you see we've got impasse, synthesis. Impasse. Now we're waiting for another synthesis, right? And the next great synthesis is a religion that also had a profoundly philosophical aspect to it called Christianity. And so Christianity is born into a world of profound sort of skepticism and cynicism about life in general. The Roman world was not one that was really juiced up on great, high, wonderful, lofty thoughts about the big questions of reality and so on. They were concerned about power. They were concerned about dominating the earth politically and so on. And the Christian faith comes along, and it performs a kind of synthesizing work at that time. Now, I want to think about this just a little bit differently. I want to go back to our two terms, epistemology and ontology. And let me just suggest to you that if we take Plato and Aristotle and analyze them with respect to these two words, you're going to find that one of them is strong epistemologically, but not so strong ontologically. The other is stronger ontologically, but not so strong epistemologically. Okay, I'm just kind of slicing this a little bit differently. I want you to think about that for a moment and see if you can propose which is which and explain why. So the question on the floor is, if you take these two ideas, epistemology, ontology, my hypothesis is that one of these two guys, Plato, Aristotle are the two I'm thinking of, one of them is quite strong epistemologically, but not so strong ontologically, and the other is just the reverse of that. Who wants to take a stab at it?
I think Aristotle's stronger epistemologically.
All right, and why do you think that?
When he does an empiricism, it seems like it's easier. He has an easier way of knowing things because he just believes that you learn it through your senses. And then ontology-wise, Plato has a firm sense of what's real because he has that ideal world, and Aristotle doesn't really have that.
Okay, that's now, is that persuasive to you, Spencer? Did you follow that? Not quite persuaded
I
yet.
think there's, I don't,
Huh?
no, I'm not, I mean, there's two advantages.
All right.
I think there's two aspects. I haven't been completely persuaded.
Haven't been persuaded yet. Avery?
I think with ontology being the study of being and Plato's world of forms, I think those two are very strongly connected. That's why I would say Plato's more ontologically inclined. Yeah. But, and then Aristotle, just from what we've read in his rhetoric book and stuff, he seems more facts-based and stuff, and so I would put him as the more epistemologically inclined.
Okay, good. Well stated. Sydney, you had your hand up. You wanna-
As far as like Aristotle, I think he is more strongly oriented towards epistemology, just because he spent so much time on his categories and how to know what is like what you know really is and all that stuff.
Okay.
So that's what.
All right. You ready to vote? We'll settle this the American way. You know? All right, you've all been listening to this very, very good, sophisticated discussion at this point. How many are going to go with the Sydney, Avery, Sydney? Okay, well, it looks to me like we have to go with them because the majority's got to be right, right? Is that the way? All right, well, that would be my view too. Sorry, Spencer, but my view would be that as between the two, epistemologically, you would say Aristotle is stronger. Plato is weaker. However, ontologically, it's just the opposite. I think here you'd say Aristotle is weaker. Plato is stronger. Now, this is just an opinion. I mean, I do happen to agree with the majority. The majority agrees with me. I don't know which, but the reasons are, however, are important, and it's the analysis I'm concerned about more here. And somebody has said it well, so I'm just repeating what's been said. When it comes to ontology, the question is, what is real? Or what is ultimately reliable? What's the foundation upon which I can build my life and so on? And Plato gives, the great classic answer that there is this real and eternal level of truth, and that you can safely build your life on that. You can call something a chair because there is chairness. You can call something beautiful because there is beautiness, if you will. There is absolute eternal beauty. And when you start talking that way, you are talking about a very strong ontological foundation for your thought. He believes it's really there. But the reason that Plato is somewhat weaker epistemologically is, what do you think? Some of you who've spoken so well to this, where is the great weakness in Plato epistemologically? His weakness is what, Krista?
If epistemology is the study of knowledge, then he would be weak. His argument would be weak because no one really remembers the forms, and no one knows what it is.
That's exactly right. That's right. I say to Plato, hey man, I like your concept of an ideal world. That is very, very impressive. I like your way of saying that the Mona Lisa and the Betty Sue are in fact different, measured on the axis of beauty. I like the fact that you're saying it's not just opinion. It's not just my private kind of inner tilt. But there's something out there in the real order of things that says one of those is more beautiful than the other, in fact, not just in opinion, right? I like that about you, Plato. But what gives me trouble here is you tell me the reason I know this is because there's an ideal world, and to be honest with you, I've never seen it. I mean, have any of you ever seen the ideal world? Matt, you ever been there? Matt's been there. And when were you there? How old were you? Did you bring back some of it for us? Oh, okay. I talked him out of it just like that. How does Plato say we know the ideal world? What's his, in other words, get it, what is his epistemological method by which we know the ideal world? The answer is, it is what? Ben? How does Plato say we know the ideal world?
He says we have a faint memory of it.
We have a faint memory. I have a faint memory of a land where lollipops grow on trees. I actually thought about a land like that when I was a little kid. Go to sleep at night, think to myself, there's a lollipop land, you know. Now, who's to say, maybe I actually visited that place once. Maybe what's in my mind is a faint memory of it. But just to be honest, I think most of you would be rightly skeptical of my hypothesis concerning lollipop land. And you could probably imagine it too, but that doesn't mean it actually exists, right? The fact that I can conceive of something in my brain does not mean that it's actually out there. It's like the unicorn problem. We can all think of a unicorn, but Josiah, have you ever actually, jumped on the back of one and ridden around in the backyard? Huh? No. And that's the problem with Plato's ideal world. I want you to get this. Do you see why Plato is strong ontologically? He's got a great foundation for truth, but weak epistemologically, because how do we know for sure it's actually there? The best he can give us is a theory of recollection, which is not all that persuasive, to be honest with you. Any comment on that, Josiah? Go ahead.
Ontologically speaking, why is Aristotle, I mean, we're talking about Plato's ideal world and world forms, but wouldn't Aristotle take a more scientific, empiricist approach to ontology and what's really real?
That's right.
So, and that, I don't know, today that's what most people would take kind of view, more scientific, naturalistic
right.
world, and that seems kind of strong. I mean, it's
strong in what sense?
That it's hard to persuade them sometimes.
Let me ask you this, Josiah. Let's shift our discussion to Aristotle. We've been talking about Plato, right? We ask Aristotle the question, why is the Mona Lisa more beautiful than the Betty Sue? Okay? Aristotle cannot tell us it's because there's eternal beauty out there in the ideal world. So what is Aristotle's answer? How does he determine that one is more? He would agree that Mona Lisa is more beautiful than Betty Sue. He would agree with that. The question is, how did he reach the conviction that the Mona Lisa is more beautiful than Betty Sue?
He would probably say that he'd probably start taking it apart and try to categorize things like using symmetry and
he probably would do that. That's right. He'd do a little. That's right. There's another way. That's one. He would do that, but he'd do that in the context of something else. There's a method he would use to decide that the Mona Lisa is obviously more beautiful than the Betty Sue. It's a little more obvious than what you
would
just
he just
suggested.
classify it with other things that are similar to it?
And how does he know the other things that are similar to it? How does he know that? He can't appeal to an ideal world of beautiness.
From what he's seen, that's
What he's seen, and you're on the right track. Does anybody know what I'm after here? I don't want to be too obscure. But how's he going to do it?
Well, is it just human perception?
Yeah, that's right. That's all. He's going to notice it's his own perception and everybody else's. Let's face it. When I hung up that, now I, of course, disagree with all of you. I think the Betty Sue is transcendently more beautiful than the Mona Lisa. But the fact of the matter is, I think all of you, if you were honest, well, except for Mr. Fugit, he rose in my defense. So the two of us, having taken many years of art appreciation, probably see something you don't, but in the greater scheme of things, most of you agreed the Mona Lisa has it over the Betty Sue. Aristotle cannot appeal to absolute beauty because he does not believe in absolute beauty. So how does he know? Well, the way he knows is by counting noses. He looks at the room and he notices that most of the people in this room vote for Mona Lisa, and therefore, as a matter of observation, scientific assessment, he reaches the conclusion that there must be some kind of beauty in it. He categorizes it in a sense based on that sort of analysis of public opinion. This is how it's done. That's how he does his politics, you see? That's how he does most of his philosophy. It's an observational, kind of scientific thing. I see you. Hang on just a second here. Now, do you see that makes him epistemologically strong? He can give you statistics. He can give you data. He can give you a centrifuge. He can give you a scientific laboratory. He can give you analysis. He can give you all the credibility that scientists have when they walk around with white little aprons on and look at things and look smart and say things that sound like they know what they're talking about. That's what he has, scientific credibility. But ultimately, where is his ontology? You see. Is there an absolute fixed reference point for these things? Answer? No. It still has to kind of float in the world of people's opinions. You grab that? You can see what's going on? Oh, no, go ahead. Sidney.
So with regard to beauty, according to Aristotle,
Yeah.
if it's based upon public opinion, where did it start? Because, I mean, the world had to begin and somebody had to, like...
Yeah. And he doesn't worry about it. Plato worries about those things because Plato's worried about the ultimate whys of life. Aristotle's more concerned about the ultimate whats of life. And it just is what it is, you know. And he may hypothesize, and I'm simplifying Aristotle. Please understand, I'm being a little unfair with Aristotle here. But fundamentally, that's the problem he's got. See?
I still don't really understand why you would say that Aristotle has a weaker ontology.
Mhm.
I kind of get the epistemological
Okay.
argument, but the ontology with like Aristotle's categories and his causes, doesn't
Yeah.
he, like to me at least, that seems like a better explanation for like how things exist and how things change in the world.
But notice even those causes are simply observation. He's simply telling you, based on observation, how things change. But he's not ultimately telling you what is real. You see, he's leaving that question unanswered. It's what's ultimately behind it all that explains it all. That's where he kind of, you know. Let me call it a little bit closer example here. Let's say that you live in a society where there's a certain debate on a certain moral issue. I won't name one, you can just fill in the blank here. And let's say that in this society, 49% of the people, you know, go one direction, 51% go the other direction. All right, so we have kind of a close call. We have a society where there's a moral debate going on over a particular practice, and it's a pretty even divide. But you go out and you take a straw poll, you take a sample, you take a vote, whatever, you got 51% tilt in one direction, 49% tilt in the other. All right. Now, in that society, what is right? And how do we know what is right? What is right, Sydney, in that society, and how do we know? In Aristotle's world.
The 51% is right.
And the reason they're right is because
It's more of them.
there's more of them. That's right. It's coming around election cycle, and the people who have a vested interest in the 49% position are interested in winning the day at the polls, but they know as the way it stands right now, they're going to lose because 51% go this way. So they go and hire the slickest, most professional, whiz-bang Madison Avenue advertising agency they can come up with. And they spend beaucoup money, and this advertising agency comes up with a kind of national blitz of advertisements that are going to show up on TV, on the radio, on billboards, you name it, the internet, whatever. And they're just going to hit this country with all kinds of really flashy, impressive, persuasive advertising techniques that are intended to manipulate the opinions of people. Not necessarily manipulate them reasonably, but just manipulate them at whatever level or subliminal level they can to get these people to change their views. And they do this for 2 weeks, and you know what happens? After 2 weeks, 2% of the people the people who are the most unprincipled, wishy-washy, thoughtless, superficial, shallow people change their views because it works on them. You follow what I'm saying? Doesn't have to work on everybody. It just has to work on the people who are the most shallow in their thinking. But 2% of them shift. And all of a sudden we've got 51% now favor what yesterday they opposed. What just became truth in that society. You see the il problemo here? You see? And what can Aristotle do about that? He doesn't have really anywhere to go. Now, again, I'm being overly harsh with Aristotle. He would have somewhere to go. But in principle, this is a big problem for him. Let's say the problem is something like abortion. There was a time in this country, in my lifetime, maybe not in yours, when you would go out and you would sample people in our country and you'd find the vast majority would oppose abortion. The vast majority. It was not even it was a no-brainer, you know. You had a few, I mean, it was just something confined to dark alleys and bad places and bad people. That's the public opinion. And over about a 20-year period, there was a constant onslaught of opinion-manipulating devices that gradually brought us to the point where now if you go out and take a straw poll, what? You find the majority of people favor abortion, at least in some cases. That has happened in our society within my lifetime. I'm not as old as you think. Does that mean that in the last 50 years in the United States of America, the fundamental morality of abortion has changed? That is to say, has something that used to be wrong become okay as a matter of objective, ethical truth? Has it changed? Nicole, you say no. Has it changed, however, in our society? Our society's perception of it, yes. Now think about Plato. Would Plato say that whatever his view of abortion would be, I don't know what it would be, but let's say, just as a matter of conversation, would Plato say that the fundamental ethical significance of abortion would change based on public opinion? Would Plato say that? Answer, no. Would Aristotle say it? Answer, yes. And that's why he's not ontologically strong, because his foundation for truth can change based on observation. Y'all follow that? That's the great impasse we have now between Plato and Aristotle. Aristotle gives us a great methodology for learning, but no great methodology for finally arriving at the truth. You see. Plato gives us a great methodology for arriving at the truth, but he's not very good at how we got there. Well, we just remember it. You see, and so you see that? So Plato, Aristotle. One is strong, one is weak at two different points. Yes?
Well, in order to have a strong ontology, do you have to have an objective standard of truth to everything?
Yeah, well, to everything that matters. I mean, maybe not to, which do you like better, Butterfingers or Mars bars? I mean, there are some things maybe that are trivial enough that the truth of the matter is your personal preference and taste. But when it comes to matters of morality, of ethics, of truth, of beauty, ultimate standards of, then, yeah. Does that answer your question? Is that what you're, yeah. All right. This is the world, this is the skeptical world in which I've erased everything I can refer to here. This is the skeptical world into which Christ was born. Okay? And it was true even in the Jewish world. You didn't have, powerful kind of philosophical figures in the Jewish world standing for great classical Jewish truth. I mean, you had some, but it wasn't the dominant kind of culture of the day. It was a time of skepticism, cynicism, really throughout the entire ancient Near Eastern world. Let me ask you the question. let's take now neither Plato nor Aristotle. Let's take not Jesus, because Jesus doesn't come along offering himself as a philosopher. He doesn't say, hey, I'm the next Plato, you know. He comes as the Messiah. And he comes fulfilling a paradigm that had been pretty well defined in Old Testament scriptures, and there was an expectancy of a person who would come who would be messianic. And Jesus fits the bill, and we as Christians concur in that hypothesis that he was indeed the Messiah that was predicted. But there is a Christian movement that comes after Jesus that begins to translate the significance of that man into, among other things, philosophical ideas. So it doesn't take long for the Christian church to start doing philosophy. You follow me? It doesn't do it all that well at the beginning. It takes an Augustine to really do it well, but it's being done even by the early 2nd century. You follow me? Christian people trying to speak to the philosophical malaise of the ancient world from a Christian point of view. And the thing is, even though we didn't have wonderful, great thinkers Christianly, we had a powerful philosophical idea that grabbed on. This is one of the most remarkable reversals of ancient history, just as a matter of history. Aside from the fact that you're a Christian and look at this through the eyes of faith, just through the eyes of history, it's an astonishing kind of impact that the Christian faith has, because, in my opinion, it comes along and it is both epistemologically and ontologically robust, strong, persuasive. It does what neither Plato or Aristotle could do. It satisfies the deficiencies of both of them and meets and exceeds the strengths of both of them. And that is part of the reason that Christianity had such a revolutionary effect, you see, which it did. It's just a matter of history. You know, I'm not speaking now as a Christian or as a, I'm just saying as a matter of just objective, detached history. The Christian movement in the 1st and early 2nd century had a huge impact, and increasingly, significant impact over the next several decades and centuries. Why is the Christian faith ontologically strong? Where is the great strength? Where does the Christian faith meet and exceed the ideal world of Plato? Where is it? It outdoes Plato in terms of ontological strength. Where is that? This is not a tough question. You don't have to think too deeply about it. Sarah, what do you suppose? What is the great ontological strength? That is, what is the great source of absolute truth, that Plato's looking for in the Christian faith? Okay, it would be, we don't even have to go that far. It is simply, it is Christ, but in the bigger scheme of things, it is God. Thank you, yeah. There is God. There is not gods, which isn't good grammar, by the way. There is not gods. Sometimes I say those things just to see it. There is not, a plurality of gods. There's not, Zeus and Athena and all these people having affairs and doing weird stuff on Mount Olympus. You don't have, because there's nothing absolute about that. Those gods are not much better than us. They're just bigger and stronger, but they're no better, And you look to the Greeks and you say, well, where is your God? And they kind of look at you like you're nuts. Well, I don't know, Aristotle had this unmoved mover kind of cat. But, really, nobody's got it. But along comes the Christian faith, growing out, of course, that Jewish tradition of a God. One God, and all the rest are trash. There's only one, and that one is the absolute being behind all things. And get this, and it takes Augustine to really help us understand this. We haven't gotten to him yet. But it is Augustine who shows us that it is in God and God alone that we have Plato's ideal world. The ideal world of Plato was correct. But what Plato couldn't really tell us is, where is it? Augustine says, let me tell you where it is. It's in the mind of God. That's where it is. Because there is God, there is truth. Because there is God, there is a perfect circle. Because there is God, there is beauty. Because there is God, all of these things that Plato intuited were out there are really there. You see, you follow that? Please follow this. Where does the Christian faith turn around and say, but there's also this great, wonderful epistemological powerhouse, you see, satisfying everything Aristotle could have wanted and more. So Christian faith outdoes Plato and outdoes Aristotle. Where's the great epistemological? Where does the Christian faith invite you to observe, to look, see, touch, taste, handle, and so on? Where is that all going on, Jacob?
Well, I would say the scriptures.
The scriptures are a very good answer, and there's something even more poignant that lies, that's going to be, because everybody's writing stuff, but there's something even more poignant than that, but that's awfully close. Is that what you're going to say?
Yeah, well, there's general and speculative.
There is, yeah. There's something more powerful than that. And this is distinctively Christian, and it is, pretend you're in Sunday school. Jesus! Is that what you're going to say? Yeah. Okay, if you've never quite gotten this in your life, get it today. This is what incarnation is all about. God became what? This worldly. He became receptacle. The ideal became a participant in the concrete and mortar of human history. So the New Testament invites us, and in fact, you know, this is the language of 1 John 1. 1 John 1, which is an anti-Gnostic book, saying that which we have. Does anybody know how it goes? The first few verses of 1 John, not Gospel of John, 1 John chapter 1. Do you know it, Ben?
That which we have heard from the beginning, which we have seen with our eyes, we have touched with our hands.
That's good. Okay. Y'all follow that? You hear the power of that? That which was from the beginning, ontologically, eternal, right? That which was from the beginning, which we have seen, which we have heard, which we have looked upon, and our hands have handled. Why does he say that? He wants us to understand that the Christian faith also has something to say for the Aristotelian, who wants to handle things, look at things, analyze things, be a scientist. Jesus comes on the scene saying, here I am, touch me, examine me. And so the whole Christian faith proceeds on the premise that the eternal stepped into time and came walking up to people and say, here I am. You know? All the Aristotelians in the room, take a big look. Because now that which is eternal, ontologically, has reached down here into time and space and said, epistemologically, you can check me out. And that had such a powerful effect on the ancient psyche, that this is something that, you know, could be done. That Jesus rapidly became one of the most famous characters in the world. You know, not holding himself out as a prophet or just as another guy or a great guru or some enlightened figure, but as God among us. That's a powerful, really history-changing thing. And from that point on, I tell you, every philosophy from that point on has had to be primarily concerned with what do you do with Jesus. I mean, whether it's Kant, whether it's Darwin, whether it's Schleiermacher, whether it's you name it, they all have to deal with that issue. He's become the great kind of turning point, you see, for philosophy. I'll grab that. Hope so, because our time is up, and you're dismissed.